Welcome to another episode of the ADHD Parenting Podcast. I'm Ryan.
And my name is Mike.
And today we are going to answer listener-submitted questions.
Welcome to the ADHD Parenting Podcast with Mike McLeod of Grow Now ADHD and Ryan Wetzelblatt of ADHD Dude. Learn about parenting kids with ADHD from a licensed clinical social worker and speech-language pathologist who specializes in ADHD. No fluffy parenting advice, only practical information that will equip you to help your child with ADHD effectively.
So, if you would like us to answer your question in an upcoming episode, please take a screenshot of your review, send it to us along with your child's age, and please make sure to include if they're on medication or not, because that might influence our answer. Send it to the ADHD Parenting Podcast at gmail.com, and we'll be happy to answer it. All right. So, Mike, we have a bunch of listener-submitted questions today, and I think we should just get into it. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Yeah. So Ryan and I have been getting lots of responses. A lot of people have been leaving reviews. So thank you to everyone leaving reviews. And thanks for the questions. Make sure if you want us to answer your question, you do leave a review. But we've been getting so much engagement, so many private messages about people enjoying the podcast. So thank you all for the positive feedback. It means a lot, and it keeps us going.
Absolutely. All right, Mike. So the first question is how to get grandparents on board with no screens. How to get them to understand that screens at grandma's house makes mom and dad and kids' life hell when they get back home. The dopamine withdrawal turns into major dangerous meltdowns. No medication. My son is 7. Also, would love to hear you guys talk about nutrition and supplementation. So I'll just answer the first part and then I'll let Mike answer the rest. And Mike, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like talking about nutrition and supplementation is a little out of my wheelhouse. It's not something I really read research on. I'm not saying there's not validity and it's not important, but there's just so much out there that we can, keep on top of. And this is just not an area that I've chosen to stay on top of.
Yeah, and basically a healthy diet is a healthy diet. So,
Yes.
those sorts of things are good for all kids, good for all humans. It's not really something that's going to improve the dysregulation with ADHD. So this issue with screens when not in direct control, your child being in your environment. So whether it's going to grandparents' house or going to, whether it's divorced or separated parents, where what you tend to see is one of the parent ends up trying to be kind of like the cool parent and intentionally becomes very permissive. So when the kid comes to their house, they enjoy it more than going to the other parent's house. I see that all the time.
All the time.
And now this also with the grandparents' house. So really what needs to happen is you can, share our videos, share our screen debate podcast with the grandparents. You might have to show them how to do a podcast. I don't know how often grandparents listen to podcasts. But overall, show them that episode. But overall, you're probably just going to have to make sure whatever screens the kids are going on at the grandparents' house is not available to them. That's probably what you're most likely going to have to do. If there is an Xbox, a PlayStation, a Switch at the grandparents' house, you're going to have to do everything you can to get that out of the house. Because if it's there, clearly the grandparents don't have, the authority or maybe the energy levels to say, no, go do something else. And we know the ADHD brain is always going to choose the path of least resistance 100 times out of 100 times. If an Xbox, a PlayStation, a Switch, a gaming computer is there in the environment, they are going to choose that over every other task 100% of the time. And you are seeing the dopamine withdrawals, you are seeing the high stimulation withdrawals when they leave the grandparents and come home. So you are going to have to do everything you can to remove those things from the house, password protect computers, get rid of video game systems, shut down iPhones using parental controls when they're at grandparents' house. Maybe give grandparents a list of ideas, show them where there's local parks, show them, let the kids go do things outside. Give them a list of other activities that kids can do when they're at the house besides screens. But what a great example of the negative impact of screens and high stimulation on the ADHD brain. They go somewhere out of your control. They overindulge in screens. You get them afterwards, and you deal with the withdrawals of the drug. So great question, but step in and use your parental authority. Those are your kids at the end of the day, and they should not have access to those screens.
And all I was going to say was exactly what Mike said in the end, that you're going to have to step into your parental authority and say, "Hey, look, this is what I need from you. You know, I value you spending time with the kids, and this is what happens when they have the screen time when you're with them, and I really need you to stop doing that." So step into your parental authority. Don't be afraid of it, because you're doing what's best for your child, and that's more important than protecting the feelings of an adult, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's not fair to you to get, the after effects of those screens. Obviously they're going to grandparents' house, and it's very healthy for kids to have access to grandparents and family members outside of the mom and dad. So that's a wonderful thing and a privilege that you have. Many kids don't live near their grandparents anymore in today's world, or don't have access to grandparents. So that's a wonderful thing. But you got to step in and really show them your authority, and share some information about how bad these screens are. Don't let the grandparents be permissive and you get stuck with the after effects and the withdrawals.
Right. All right. So the next question, it says, "Hello, love your podcast a lot and find it very helpful. That's why I'm emailing you for some advice. My son is 10. He has ADHD, takes Vyvanse and Guanfacine. He has been very withdrawn from his friends. He used to be a social butterfly. He prefers just being inside versus going sledding, which we do a lot when it snows, and he used to enjoy it with his friends. He really just likes video games, but I monitor 30 minutes during school days after homework is done and on weekends for 1 hour. He has been following this rule with no problem, but has been very grumpy and having a bad attitude with me, his mother, for at least 6 weeks. He can be very disrespectful to me and raising his tone. I did take his video games away since one day he would not turn it off when the timer went off and started blaming me that I moved the timer because it had 30 minutes yet, and started yelling at me. So I took it away for the rest of the week. What do I do for him to be more respectful of me and have more positive thoughts? So, Mike, I'm going to start off with this one, and I think something we both agree on. Number one, stop using the timer because timers do not teach you how to feel time. Timers only show you time remaining. We are well aware that one of the most common strategies parents of kids with ADHD see and talk to each other about in Facebook groups is using a timer or that red countdown timer. The problem with that is they do not teach you how to sense the passage of time. They only show you time remaining. So that is not an effective strategy to help kids with ADHD learn to sense the passage of time. Okay, so both Mike and I teach strategies for this. I teach it in my executive function crash course. Mike teaches strategies for this in their executive function treatment sessions with kids, and parents are also brought into the loop. I mean, I'll let Mike talk about that. But anyway, the one thing, Mike, I wanted to say here is that, instead of taking things away, and I am not anti punishment by any means, but what I teach parents is rather than taking things away, which I call reactive parenting, have expectations in place for earning the things you provide for them, like screen time. So, what I say is have daily expectations in place for helping around the house and for behavior. For a 10-year-old, I say typically have 4 daily expectations in place. So, 2 for behavior, 2 for helping around the house. So if speaking in a respectful way is one of the daily expectations, that's fine. And I teach this in my scaffolding better behavior course. The other part I just want to address real quick is about having more positive thoughts, right? You cannot change your son's thoughts. And this is something like I particularly hear from mothers a lot. They say, well, how do I get him excited about this? Or how do I change his mind about this? You don't. And stop trying to
Yep.
convince him of things, right? And I'm going to let Mike address the preference for staying inside and playing video games part. But I just want to explain that, yes, you cannot convince your son to like to go outside more. You can not convince him to change his attitude. The actions you take will do those things. So, Mike, go ahead.
Yes, and that's another story. This whole idea, like Ryan likes to say in his parenting program, is your child is not your partner in parenting, and that's something I hear time and time again. Is how do we convince him to stop being on screens? How do we convince him that we're gonna change our parenting style? How do we help him understand? They don't have to understand. You're the parent, they're the kids. So on to the second part of that question. Obviously, if you listen to our screen episode, sort of our differences of opinions on screens. And, the reason for that is, I work, more directly with, I do so many parent intake calls every single day. And I hear from probably 10, 15, 20 parents a day whose children's lives have been stolen by big tech. So it's obviously something I'm incredibly passionate about. And, this is a parent who obviously did everything she could to limit screens. So it was like an hour a day here, half hour here, those sorts of things. So she was limiting it. But based on the behavior, the grumpiness, the dysregulation, those sorts of things, she ended up giving her son too much tech too soon before the child's brain was ready for it. And that's to no fault of her own. You are raising a child in the era of big tech, where these material goods are being marketed towards children as a necessity. You need these things to make friends. Screens are social. Minecraft, Roblox, Fortnite are social things. They need these things. And your kid is asking for it, asking for it, asking for it. And they're very good at pulling at your heartstrings. All my friends have it. If I don't get it, you're the worst parent. You're the meanest parent. All of those things. But we have to remember, behavior is communication, and all of that behavior you're seeing when they are not on screens, refusing to turn it off, grumpiness towards you, not wanting to do anything besides screens, is them telling you that they are not ready for screens. So my recommendation would be to fully remove those screens. There is no reason for that child to have access to those screens if it's going to take over his brain, and it's going to cause more dysregulation. And we know that screens are experience killers. So as long as they are available to the child, they are going to choose that screen 100% of the time. And kids with ADHD need experiences, need a childhood, arguably even more than the neurotypical child,
Yes.
because ADHD is a disorder of self-regulation. They cannot naturally self-regulate and monitor their own screen time. A neurotypical child might play Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft for an hour or two, get bored, and then go outside or go exercise or go do, kid type things. An ADHD child will be on that screen as much as possible, and it will take over their brains and dysregulate their brains, affect their sleep, affect their eating, affect their appetite, affect their mood, all in very negative ways. So it is far more important for you to be authoritative around screens. I would remove them entirely, persevere through those withdrawal behaviors, and allow them to naturally gravitate towards more healthy and positive experiences like going outside, riding bikes, music, art, reading, face-to-face social interaction. Remove those screens, persevere, and watch them get involved in more positive things.
And Mike, I just want to address this because we were talking about this morning, that, there may be some parents listening to this who might be thinking right now, well, Minecraft is social, right? And my child, they're working in, like, and collaborating, and, it's, they're communicating and all this. I'm sorry, but interacting on a screen through a screen will never, ever replace real life social interaction and executive function skill development. And what we know very clearly is that the way executive function and social skills develop naturally for all children is through unstructured play and spending time together, right, without adults directing and without the use of screens. So no matter the value you think there may be in Roblox or Minecraft, whatever, it will never replace spending time together in real life for development of skills.
Yes, and let's be honest, because of big tech and the pressure they put on kids, they basically found that we're going to make the most of our money, we're going to make the most profit if we target children, especially neurodiverse children who get addicted. So you can arguably say there's never been a harder time to be a parent, because these massive corporations are pushing addictive drugs on our kids and our neurodivergent youth. So when parents realize, hey, my son, my daughter is addicted to their phone, addicted to Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft. And, it's very scary to think of removing a drug from your child's life. It's scary. They're going to withdraw. They're going to freak out. And it's a very scary thing. So what do parents do? They start to convince themselves that it's okay. Oh, Roblox is social. Minecraft is social. They're learning engineering skills. They're being creative. They're interacting. They're talking to their friends while they're playing. All of these things just are not true, period. And your child's life, your child's childhood is being stolen from them. And screens are experience killers. And that's how executive functions are developed, through varied experiences, not through lectures, not through classrooms, not through worksheets. It is through experiences. If your child is not bored, if your child is not using their imagination, if they're not in nature, going outside, having face-to-face interactions, they're not going to be ready, regardless of how big their IEP is, how big their 504 is, what their grades are, what school they went to, what town they grew up in. None of that's going to matter if they don't have social executive functions and executive functioning skills. And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing these kids, have great grades with strong IEPs and 504s and things like that. But once freshman year of college comes around, they can't handle it. They can't handle it because their entire childhood was spent on a screen.
See that all the time. Yes. All right. Next question, Mike. This one is from a dad. Says boy, age 7, with 2 younger brothers. He's on Ritalin extended release. He actually asked quite a few questions here. I'm going to narrow it down to just 2, and they're all good questions, but we just can't answer, all of them. So let me start with this. I started using declarative language to the best of my ability 3 days ago. So, for example, I wonder if we could, I wonder if this or that. The day was okay, but by the next day, he was ignoring me again and even responding that I'm not even asking anything, that I'm just saying things that do not relate to him, saying, I wonder if you should shut up, or just saying that I should just tell him what to do, for which he has a history of reacting very negatively. So I guess, Mike, the question in there is, is he doing something wrong with using declarative language? What should he be doing differently? And I think we need to address how he should handle it if his son says, things like, I wonder if you should shut up. So this is your wheelhouse, so go ahead.
Yeah, so you're probably talking a bit too much. So, in terms of using that declarative language, you want to say what you need to say and walk away. So the more, remember, at the end of the day, yes, you're going from directive language to declarative language, which is a great first step. But we have to remember, overall, language makes dysregulation worse. So the more language you use and the more attention you give, if you're standing there waiting for a response, standing there staring at your child, waiting for them to listen to your declarative language and then go and do the right thing, you're still giving the child the stage, the microphone, the spotlight, all on them to do the opposite of what is expected of them, which provides more attention. So we have to remember the ADHD brain is a negative attention stimulated brain. It's not attention deficit disorder. It's negative attention stimulation disorder. So it is a conflict seeking brain. So if your child, and many kids with ADHD are very, very bright in average to above average IQ. So yes, you're using declarative language, but he's still picking up on what you want him to do. So based on the ADHD brain being negative attention stimulating, let's say it's, hey, I wonder if it's time to put on your shoes. I wonder if you need your coat. They still know dad wants me to put my coat on. What's more stimulating to the ADHD brain? Go and put a coat on and hear a real quick, good job, I'm proud of you, or not put your coat on and have your dad get angry and chase you around the house for 3 hours. That's really what it is. They want that cat and mouse game. They want that control. So I would say your basic declarative language statement, walk away and give them a chance. But when you do walk away, you have to make sure they're not just scrolling on their phone or playing a game or watching YouTube or things like that, because you could phrase declarative language in the best possible way in the world. If they're getting stimulated by a screen, they are not processing what you're saying, and they're going to keep playing that screen and not do what they're supposed to do. So you can use declarative language, sure, but if they're on a screen while you're saying it, you're wasting your time and you just sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. You're getting nowhere.
All right. So, Mike, I want to ask this or a question comment. So, one of the things I teach parents in my executive function crash course is when you shift your language like this, okay, from moving away from what we call prompting language to using declarative language. One of the things I teach is you have to give kids some context for understanding this, right? And understanding the why behind why we're doing this. So I'm wondering if maybe the part that's missing here is that he didn't give his son some context to say, I want to help your brain voice get better, at doing things on your own. So I'm going to say some things differently. So instead of telling you, go get your jacket, I might say that a little different because I want you to use your brain voice to think about what you should do. What are your thoughts about that from a language perspective, in terms of giving kids context for understanding why you're shifting the way you use language, particularly for this age, for 7?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important to make
Okay.
kids more aware. So we remember one of the foundational executive functioning skills is self-awareness. And this is one of those ones, it's one of the first to develop when young babies start to recognize that they have an effect on their environment. When I cry, something happens. When I smile, something happens. But it also gets significantly delayed where they get older and they don't even think they have a problem. They think their parents are just annoying and on their back all the time and making them do things they don't want to do, and they're not aware of how delayed they are compared to so many of their peers. So making them more aware that, hey, there is a voice inside of your head that you can talk to, that can motivate you to do things that you don't find entertaining, that you don't find stimulating. So, so many of these kids don't, have that natural gift of using a positive, motivating internal voice of verbal working memory. So we have to make them aware that, hey, there is a voice in your head. You do have a brain coach. You do have someone you can talk to that can help you do things now so you can have fun later.
Okay. The other part of his question is this. He said, again, this little boy, 7, he is completely clueless about time. Said, I get out of the bed within 5 minutes. Packing takes 15 seconds. It takes me 5 seconds to go from breakfast to brush teeth. What do we do without using imperative language? Seems like even building a timeline chart will take a lot of interaction. So, Mike, I'll address this first, and then I want to hear your thoughts. Um, and please, chime in here. So, number one, a 7-year-old does not have a sense of time to begin with. Really, even a 7-year-old without ADHD. So, when we're talking about ADHD, I'm sure most people listening to this have heard the term time blindness. People with ADHD do not experience time the same way that somebody without ADHD does. So, for a 7-year-old who just developmentally doesn't have a sense of time to begin with, and a 7-year-old with ADHD has no concept of time whatsoever. So, saying things like 5 minutes, 15 minutes means nothing to them. They can't feel that and they don't know what that means. So, what we have to do is we have to, particularly for this age, because they cannot tell time on an analog clock, most likely yet. That usually happens in second grade, between 7 and 8. So, what we have to do is we have to make time visual. And the way we do that is by using an analog clock, because you do not learn to sense the passage of time on a digital clock through using timers, things like that. You have to see time in unit volume, basically the same way we measure liquid. So we can do that using an analog clock and a strategy with that. I teach that executive function crash course. I'm sure you guys teach that every single day, probably, right? With families. Okay. So that's number one. We have to make time visual for him. And it's okay if he cannot tell time on an analog clock yet, because at 7, what we can say is, when the big hand gets to, the 5, that's future plan time. That's when you have to start picturing looking like what you should look like when it's time to get ready for school. So that's part of it. Is to use a strategy like the clock strategy Mike and I both teach. But Mike, why don't you address the part he asked about, not using imperative language in relation to helping him sense the passage of time?
Of course. Yeah. So, back to the first part of that question, we have to remember that language makes dysregulation worse. So, if they're realizing that you're sort of constantly supervising, constantly watching, constantly prompting, that is further delaying his ability to figure it out himself. And he's enjoying that negative stimulation of knowing that the entire morning routine, evening routine, getting ready to get out the door is all being determined by him. So he is in complete control, and they love that cat and mouse game. So you truly want him to gain some independence. You have to unplug his brain from that negative attention stimulation. So you're following your natural parenting instincts of talking and prompting and verbal prompting and prompting and prompting and prompting. But we have to recognize that that prompting is stimulating the negative attention of the brain. So him recognizing that you're not able to do your own thing in the morning and he's in complete control is keeping that independence from being delayed. So you need to set that expectation using the clock, using visuals, whatever it may be. If you are going to prompt once and walk away, but you're going to see the most amount of progress by staying away. Number one, alter the environment. Are there things in the environment that are distracting him when he gets out of bed? Are there things in his room that he starts doing? Alter the environment, remove those things that are a distraction, and stay away. Make sure that you explain to them what's expected of them, set the clock, set alarms, create visuals. But the more you prompt, the more you talk, the more they're going to delay.
So, Mike, I want to talk about this because we might have a difference of opinion about this. Um, you said set alarm. So I would personally, I would not tell parents of a 7-year-old to set an alarm, only because they're not learning to conceptualize time then, and how easy it is to, an alarm is essentially a prompt. So it's very easy to ignore that prompt when you're playing with Legos, whatever. I want to hear from you for myself, why you suggest using, the alarm.
Well, the alarm has to be used in conjunction with a couple of other things. So
Okay,
you
so
can,
not alone, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
so you can pair the alarm with the clock. You can
right.
pair the alarm with a visual timeline. And I've seen a lot of parents get very creative with their alarms where it's their voice, being used on like an Alexa. Like the alarm is their pre-recorded voice saying something. So it's not
Oh, I like that.
yeah, so it's not just a noise going off at, the top of the hour. It's the voice saying, come to the front door, put your shoes on, put your coat on, those sorts of things.
Okay, I
And
really
because
like
it,
that.
and because it's pre-recording, the kid can't talk back to it and get a response. It's there. The kid can't get into a back and forth argument with Alexa. It's just said once and that's it.
Right. Okay, excellent. All right, Mike, let's do one more for this episode. All right, Mike. So I saved the what I figured would be your favorite question for last. This is from the parent of a third grade boy, so probably age 8, 9. And the first part of the question is, how do you find kids mask their executive function delays in different environments? One of our favorite terms, masking. So, Mike, why don't you go ahead and start with that so we can provide some clarity around this?
Sure. So, first of all, masking is this social media term that I started to see pop up during COVID when people were kind of, stuck in their house and kind of,
Yes.
creating these terms online. So, very simply put, your child is not masking their executive functioning delays in various environments. They are responding to the structure of the environment. So, what tends to happen most is students with ADHD and executive functioning challenges end up doing quite well at school because they respond very well to the structure at school, the black and white rules, and the conditional relationships that are at school. Also, the consistent peer influence of there's lots of peers around. I don't want to embarrass myself in front of my peers, which is totally fine, totally normal, not a bad thing. And they're responding quite well to the structure at school. They go home where it is unstructured, the screens are there, and the parents are there. So this is most likely what this parent is hinting at is how does my child do so well at school, but not so well at home? That's most likely what's happening because I see that most often. They are not masking at school. When you claim the child is masking, that takes the credit away from the child. Let's not say that they're masking. Let's give them the praise that they are responding well to the structure. So they deserve lots of praise for what they are doing at school and how well they are doing at school. What I tend to hear all the time is parents reach out to school staff and describe what the kid is like at home, and the teachers are like, "Whoa, I can't believe that. We don't see that kid here at all." That's because they are responding to the structure and the conditional relationships at school, and that deserves praise. That is the child doing a great job, not holding things in, increasing their anxiety, and masking their deficits. And if they can do it at school, they can do it at home. The skills are dormant at home because it's more stimulating to be on the screens or to get negative attention from the unconditional love and the unconditional relationships of parents. If there are two things that stimulate the ADHD brain and dysregulate it, it is screens and it is negative attention from parents. So if they're doing it at school, they have those skills, but at home, it is just far more stimulating to get on a screen or to emotionally manipulate, yell, scream, argue, negotiate, and be in emotional control of the home with parents. So, no, not masking. It's just a difference in environment and what's available to them.
Mike, I think it's important that we kind of define what masking actually is because as we've both seen, it is for me one of the most profoundly overused terms on social media that is used not only incorrectly, constantly, but Mike, the other thing I that really bothers me, and I think you basically alluded to this is that there's been this whole I'm going to call it a victim narrative, okay,
Yeah.
around the term masking, right? Like my poor child has been masking all day in school, right? So it's okay if they come home and flip out on me and treat me disrespectfully, right? Or, they're masking because they have to like pay attention or whatever. And one of the things I want to first explain, and then I want you to address that, okay, is let's explain what masking is. And I'm going to use the example I've used before of one of my former students. This is a guy with autism who's now in his early 30s. He's in a professional career. He's doing great. This is an example of what masking really is. So I'm going to call him Matt. So I explained Matt never heard of the term masking before, and I said I want your opinion on this, and I explained it to him, and he said okay. He said so yes, here's when I mask. He said when I'm at work, I feel like I have to have more enthusiasm in my voice because the way, my tone tends to, my voice tends to be kind of flat and monotone. And I feel like people will think I'm depressed or I'm not interested in them. So I try to have more enthusiasm in my voice at work. That is a perfect example of masking. And he is correct. His voice is rather monotone. He kind of has a flat affect, like many people with autism do. So he does this at work because he wants people to have good thoughts about him. That is not causing him harm in any way. Could it be tiring sometimes? Yes, but he's doing it because he values his coworkers and he is fitting in a professional environment where he has an excellent job. Okay. So that is the true definition of masking. And it has become so blown out of proportion from that, the actual definition, right? To again, often being this victim narrative of about, my child, has to do this. And are they, masking their deficits and they can't be their true selves. And that's where a lot of this victim narrative is based in this idea that because my child is neurodiverse, they should be able to express themselves any way they can at any given moment, right? Without regard to anybody else. And I don't know if you agree with that, Mike, but I think that's what we tend to see a lot, right? Is that, my child should never have to hide any aspect of who they are. And my response always to that is, okay, well, if you don't want them to quote mask, then teach them it's okay to walk away from somebody in the middle of a conversation, or it's okay to tell somebody that they're boring you and you're not interested in what they're saying, because that's not masking then, right? They're sharing their genuine feelings in the moment. And if you're okay with that, fine. You're going to have a child who is completely socially isolated, probably unemployable, and they're not going to have a very happy life because they haven't learned how to give to others in the context of relationships.
100%. And this victim narrative has spun it into this negative thing that is hurting the child, increasing anxiety and increasing trauma. But in reality, every single one of us mask. So you listening to this podcast right now, you are different around your family, your parents, your siblings, your coworkers, your friends, your acquaintances. You are constantly a different person. Somewhere along the line in the pseudoscience of social media, we have created this narrative that you are one set person, and every time that you have to change who you are based on where you are or who you're interacting with, negatively impacts you, negatively impacts your brain, your
Yes.
nervous system, and you have to reset your social battery and you have to be allowed to do all of these negative things. And to even add even further into this whole victim narrative that Ryan's talking about, I have seen it taken to such extremes where the child does great at school, but not great at home. And the parents learn about masking online, where they basically say to themselves, yeah, my son masks at school. So by the time he gets home, he's so exhausted and he's so pent up and he just needs to let his true self out. I need to let him physically attack me. I need to
Right.
let him I need to be his punching bag basically. He needs to let it out on me because I'm his safe person. Or I need to let him have as many screens as he wants and let him play as many games as he wants because he did such a, because he held it in so much all day and he's just so exhausted. Yeah, kids deserve a break when they get home from school. Sure. They don't have to get started on homework as soon as they get home. Sure. But let them go outside. Let them go play outside. Let them go ride bikes. Let them go on a walk. You don't got to throw a screen in their face to let them calm down after school. And you definitely don't have to let them physically attack you. There is no excuse for your child ever physically attacking you, regardless of diagnosis or anything. That is never okay, period. And too many parents have convinced themselves that it's because of masking and exhaustion. We have to be very, very careful with this word and understand that it's just, stimulation from negative experiences with parents. That tends to be the majority of what's happening is they're stimulated through the arguing and negative attention from parents. It has nothing to do with them doing a good job at school.
Like, I want to finish on a positive. So I want you to talk about what you brought up before about, let's, framing this as a positive for the child when these things, pertaining to what people perceive as masking are actually positive attributes and something that is, helping to build a skill and something that they're putting effort towards. Because, my thing I teach is praise effort, resiliency, flexibility, and thinking about others. And I think that's what you were basically, talking about, but it's been reframed in this negative as masking. So talk a little bit more about how parents can do that and praise kids for these things that, right, that are, actually positive attributes.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And those attributes you just listed, flexibility, resiliency, all of those things, your child is showing you they have those skills at school. So I think it's very, very important to, communicate with your son's teachers, explain to them what you're seeing at home and explain to them there's differences at school. So when the child is having those behaviors, make sure those teachers provide a little bit more, one-to-one, praise to the child. Have the teacher pull the child aside and say, hey, I've been talking to mom, I've been talking to dad. I hear about how things are going at home, but I just want you to know I'm very proud of you and how well you hold it together here. It needs to be very clear, very direct, as little language as possible. And, let the child know that, yes, I am your teacher and I think you do amazing at school. But because I'm your teacher and because I care about you, I am going to talk to your parents. And your parents do fill me in about what happens at home and how angry you get and how much you yell and how much you obsess over screens, whatever it may be. So, let the teacher know that she should let the child know that you're going to communicate with home and know what's happening in the various environments, but also phrase that in a positive of, we don't see that version of you here. Let's say the student's name is Brian. We don't see that not ready, that angry version of Brian. We see you doing very well here. And I'm very proud of how you respond to the challenges we give you, the work we give you, and how well you interact with the peers and the classmates. And you are an integral member of this classroom, and we are proud to have you as part of this classroom family or group, depending on age, the words you want to use. But overall, you know, I'm going to continue to talk to your parents about what we see here and what works for you here, and give them tips about, hey, this is how I interact with Brian at school. Let's do that at home too. And we hope over time we start to see this school version of Brian make its way into the home.
I think that's perfect. And I think, Mike, really what you're saying is, let's change the narrative on this from being a thing about masking, right, and being negative to being something that's positive and giving kids, what I call and what you just described is purposeful recognition and praise for exhibiting these skills that are functional life skills we all need to be successful in life.
Exactly. And just like I said before, we all mask and it's completely normal. You are a different person at work around your coworkers than you are with your close friends, and that's okay. It is not causing any internal stress or anxiety, period, regardless of what you read on social media with all of these, influencers with their lived experience kind of stuff. It's very, very important that we recognize that masking is normal, and it has been completely exaggerated and overblown.
And Mike, you know what? If it is a little stressful, that's okay, right? Because we all have, as Dr. Ortiz said when we talked about the 4 Ds, right? We need one of the things kids need is to experience temporary distress. So if they are under, a little stress because of, having to, regulate themselves a little more or use, what I call emotional compression to, right, regulate their emotions, that's not a bad thing. That's going to help them be successful in life.
Correct. Yep. And one thing that I've started to learn in the parent coaching that we do is, yes, temporary distress is very important for the child. And guess what? It's also very important for the parent. So
Yes.
parents have to learn how to go through some temporary distress, watching your kid go through distress. Because every single time you step in to shield them from distress, or you're becoming the homework manager, you're managing academic performance, you're becoming the playdate secretary, all of these different things.
The feelings protector.
The feelings protector. Every single time you save your child from boredom and act like you are in charge of their entertainment, and it is a child-led family, which I'm learning is a pretty American way. Like, in most other cultures, it's very parent-driven and adult-driven, and the kids kind of go with them on errands and follow those sorts of things. It's a very interesting thing. We have to remember, parents, you have to learn to be okay being uncomfortable. If a parent coach tells you, stop saving him in the morning and let him experience the feeling of being late to school, that's going to
Yes.
cause you being uncomfortable. I'm sorry. You're going to have to be uncomfortable, or else your child's never going to develop those skills unless you're planning on moving into the college dorms with them.
Right. All right. I think that's a great point to end on. So, again, if you would like us to answer your question in a future episode, please send us an email with your child's age, medication regimen, and a screenshot of the positive review you left for the podcast on Apple Podcasts, and we'll be happy to answer it. And please just keep your questions concise, because sometimes people send in, 20 questions in one email that we can't answer as much as we would like to. So thank you all so much for listening or watching, and we will speak to you soon. And you can find me on YouTube. Just type in ADHD Dude. And Mike, where can everybody find you?
The best place to find me is on Instagram at GrowNowADHD.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about Mike's practice, Grow Now ADHD, please visit his website, grownowADHD.com. To learn about the services Ryan provides, please visit ADHDdude.com. You can find Mike on Instagram at GrowNowADHD and Ryan on the ADHD Dude YouTube channel. We'd love to hear your feedback or questions, so feel free to contact us at the ADHD Parenting Podcast at gmail.com. The ADHD Parenting Podcast and content posted by Grow Now ADHD or ADHD Dude are presented solely for general information and educational purposes. Our goal is to provide valuable insights and knowledge, not to replace professional services. Mike and Ryan cannot provide clinical consultation or free advice through social media or other forms of communication. The information on this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice. If you or your child have any medical or mental health concerns, please consult your healthcare professionals.